Rashad Evans had everything it took to be the greatest. The NCAA Division I wrestler found success early in MMA with his grappling expertise, and that only propelled to greater heights once he developed his striking and began to finish fights in brutal fashion. Match this with his speed, strength, and athleticism, and it came to no shock that he was going to capture UFC gold. But he didn't hold the belt for very long and ended his career on a rough note. So how good was Rashad Evans actually? Hey guys, it's Kiiyon, and today we're going to talk about Sugar Rashad Evans. He was the original Sugar Show, and I mean it because he was the perfect mix of technical fighting and one-shot finishes. This made him champion for a short bit, but even after, he still remained as a top light heavyweight. So in this video, we're going to take a look at his career to understand how good he really was. Before we get to it, as always, shout out to the undisputed members of my Patreon. They get early access to my videos, a shout out before each one, video to the Kiiyon Kimura podcast, and all the money goes to charity. So join now and let's make a change. Now let's get to it. Rashad began his MMA career on April 10th, 2004 at the age of 24. He was an NCAA Division I wrestler with karate experience. He made the transition into MMA with the help of former UFC Superfight champion Dan Severn. He won his first two fights against Dennis Reed and Danny Anderson before fighting Brian Pardo. It was an opening round fight in the Gladiator Challenge light heavyweight tournament. The two clinched up immediately and tried to take the other down, but it was Rashad who succeeded and immediately mounted Brian. From there, he threw big shots from above. Rashad tried to take a hold of his back, but Brian stood up and the two clinched once more. Rashad secured another takedown and threw shots before Herb Dean stepped in. He fought a day later against Hector Ramirez in the semifinals. This was a scrappy fight that saw both men clinch up and trade shots. Rashad truly displayed his stamina and toughness in this fight, and after an early takedown in round 2, Hector slowed down and Rashad began to take over. He even danced a little bit as well. After 2 rounds, he won by unanimous decision. Rashad advanced to the finals that same evening to defeat Jamie Jara, which made him the Gladiator Challenge light heavyweight tournament winner. So after going 5-0, he got the chance to compete on the second season of The Ultimate Fighter. It was a heavyweight season, which made the natural light heavyweight in Rashad one of the smallest competitors in the house. Regardless, he dominated in all 3 of his fights in the house, both on the feet and on the ground. He also had beef with opposing coach Matt Hughes, as Matt was not a fan of Rashad's showboating in the cage. Regardless, the two ended up making amends and Rashad advanced to the Ultimate Fighter finale. His opponent was Brad Imes, who was 6'7". Rashad opened up with some nice punches early, but then he got taken down. Once the fight got back up, the two continued to trade. Then Rashad connected with a flurry of punches that rocked Brad. He proceeded to knock him down with the left hand, and the fight looked punches away from being over. But credit to Brad for surviving and putting on an aggressive performance in the second round by continuing to press forward. Rashad also looked good in this round as he connected in the pocket as well. Leonardo DiCaprio was in the crowd and I bet he was loving it. Early in the third, Rashad knocked down Brad again, who looked to be in a lot of trouble. Yet he survived and continued to throw strikes before securing a takedown. Rashad got back up and the two were exhausted at this point, but continued to swing until the end of the round. It wasn't Forrest Griffin versus Stephen Bonner, but honestly, I think it was pretty close. And so was the fight, as after 3 rounds, Rashad won by split decision to become the Ultimate Fighter Season 2 heavyweight tournament winner. In his post-fight interview, he stated that he was definitely going to drop down to light heavyweight. So in 2006, he went 3-0 at 205, which included 2 decision wins against Sam Hoger and Stephen Bonner, as well as a second-round knockout against Jason Lambert at UFC 63. On January 25th, 2007, Rashad fought fellow amateur wrestler Sean Salmon. Despite throwing this early in the fight, Sean looked good in the first by securing 2 takedowns and throwing some ground and pound. Rashad definitely lost that round, but he came back in the second aggressively by rocking Sean on the feet with knees and punches. Shortly after, Rashad connected with a head kick that knocked Sean out cold. It was pretty nasty. I mean, Sean was out for several minutes after the fight was over. Regardless, Rashad went on to fight former UFC light heavyweight champion Tito Ortiz at UFC 73. Tito looked good early by taking the fight down and staying on top, but Rashad got back up and connected with some punches that opened up a cut under Tito's eye. Regardless, Tito connected as well and won the first. But all that work was gone in the second round as Rashad was unable to take the fight down due to Tito grabbing the cage. This was done twice before referee Big John deducted a point from Tito. But once Rashad did secure the takedown, he got trapped in a tight guillotine before the end of the round. He survived and absolutely dominated the final round on the feet and on the ground. Yet after 3 rounds, the fight was declared as a draw. 4 months later, Rashad fought Ultimate Fighter Season 3 winner Michael Bisping. It was a battle of wrestler versus striker as Rashad secured takedowns in every round and threw ground and pound. He had his moments on the feet, but for the most part, it was Bisping who was finding more success. After 3 rounds, Rashad won by split decision. At UFC 88, he fought former UFC light heavyweight champion Chuck Liddell. Rashad was a heavy underdog going into this fight. The first round was a feeling out process with some strikes being thrown by each man, but the action picked up at the start of the second as Chuck began to press forward and connect with some shots. Then Rashad answered back and the momentum began to sway his way. Chuck came rushing forward only to get caught with the right hand that knocked him out cold. The sound of his knockout is absolutely crazy to hear, and this win made Rashad the clear #1 contender. So on December 27th, 2008, he fought for the UFC light heavyweight belt against champion and Ultimate Fighter Season 1 winner Forrest Griffin. The first 2 rounds were fully on the feet with both men trading punches and kicks, but Forrest was more successful due to his volume and counters. The stand-up action continued in the opening seconds of round 3. Then Rashad caught a leg kick and used it to bring the fight down. From there, he started to rain on the hammer fists, which had Forrest in all sorts of trouble. Although he survived, Rashad continued to punish him with hard shots. Eventually, it became too much for Forrest, who covered up, and this forced Steve Mazzagatti to step in, making Rashad Evans the UFC light heavyweight champion. His first title defense was at UFC 98 against Lyoto Machida, who was 14-0 going into this fight and was on an absolute tear in the light heavyweight division. The two spent the entire fight trading shots, but Lyoto's karate background helped him throw kicks that hurt Rashad and even knocked him down near the end of round 1. The momentum continued for Lyoto in round 2, and although Rashad denied his takedown and connected with some shots, he ended up getting rocked bad by a flurry of punches. Lyoto backed him up against the cage and continued the barrage before landing a left hand that knocked Rashad out cold, making him the new light heavyweight champion. Rashad came back 6 months later to fight Thiago Silva. He dominated most of this fight with his grappling, and although Rashad got rocked by a right hand in the third, he survived and won by unanimous decision. Following this victory, he was set to fight former UFC light heavyweight champion Quinton Rampage Jackson. But prior to their bout, they coached the 10th season of The Ultimate Fighter, and in my opinion, it was one of the best seasons as the two fighters absolutely despised each other, which made for many memorable moments. So of course, there was much anticipation to their fight at UFC 114, a card they both headlined and did over 1 million pay-per-view buys. Rashad opened up strong with a right hand that rocked Rampage, and for the most part, he dominated the fight in the clinch and on the ground. Rampage's most successful moment was in the third when he rocked Rashad with punches. Rashad was hurt, but he managed to get back up and recover. He secured another takedown and threw more punches before the end of the fight. After 3 rounds, Rashad won by unanimous decision. He was set to fight for the belt for a second time against champion Mauricio Shogun Rua, but Rashad pulled out of the fight due to injury. So his teammate John Jones stepped in and defeated Shogun to become the new champion. This caused a rift between John and Rashad as their coach Greg Jackson began to favor the young champion. So Rashad left and co-founded his own team called the Black Zillions. After a year-long layoff, he came back to fight Tito Ortiz for a second time. And ring rust proved to be no issue for Rashad, who dominated the entire fight with his striking and wrestling. He eventually finished Tito in the second with a knee to the body, followed by more punches. A thumb injury sidelined Rashad from a shot at the title against John Jones, so he came back on January 28, 2012 to fight Phil Davis. Despite Phil being a young and up-and-coming prospect, Rashad's experience proved to be too much for Phil as he outclassed him on the feet and on the ground. After 3 rounds, he won by unanimous decision. And finally, at UFC 145, Rashad fought for the light heavyweight championship against champion John Jones. Although Rashad had some moments, John was the much bigger fighter and used his length to attack from a distance. He outstruck Rashad for the entire fight to win by unanimous decision. Rashad lost his next fight to Antonio Rogerio Nogueira by decision as well. It was a pretty shocking defeat for Rashad as he couldn't really pull the trigger like he usually did. And although he bounced back with a split decision win against former Pride welterweight and middleweight champion Dan Henderson, Rashad was almost finished in the first round and continued to take big shots throughout the fight. At UFC 167, he fought Chael Sonnen. It was a fantastic performance as Rashad took Chael down and finished him with a ground and pound in the first round. But following this win, he was plagued with more injuries, so he came back after 2 years on the sidelines to fight Ryan Bader. And the ring rust proved to be too much as Bader controlled the fight for 3 rounds to win by decision. Rashad came back 6 months later to fight Glover Teixeira. He got finished in the first round with a left hand followed by more punches on the floor. Rashad admitted after this loss that he felt like he was fighting against himself. He realized he had to make changes, so the first one was to drop down to middleweight for the first time in his career. His first opponent in the new weight class was Daniel Kelly. It was a competitive back and forth battle on the feet between the two fighters, but ultimately it was Kelly who won by split decision. He lost his next fight to Sam Alvey by split decision in a fight where Rashad gassed quickly and simply did not possess the same speed on the feet like he once did. So he returned to light heavyweight for his next fight at UFC 225. His opponent was Anthony Smith. Rashad got finished 53 seconds into the first round by a big knee and punches. After losing 5 fights in a row, Rashad announced his retirement from the sport on June 25, 2018. A year later, he was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. But in September of 2019, he requested to be released by the UFC to return to MMA with another promotion. And although that hasn't happened yet, I do hope Rashad closes his chapter on fighting because he has proved more than enough already and he's pretty good as an MMA analyst. So after going 19-8-1 in a career that saw him become the Ultimate Fighter Season 2 winner and the UFC light heavyweight champion, how good was Rashad Evans actually? He was a top light heavyweight for a long time in the UFC, which in itself is impressive, because this was at a time when the light heavyweight division was the most stacked, so much so that it was difficult for the belt to be defended even once. Rashad's wrestling was his main offense early on in his career, which gave him the reputation as a one-dimensional fighter early on. And I find that funny in retrospect, as once he started letting go of his powerful hands, he not only became an all-around force, but he was also gaining recognition as one of the most exciting fighters to watch. I mean, those knockouts against Chuck Liddell and Sean Salmon will forever be on on highlight reels. It wasn't a matter of if he would capture the UFC belt because that seemed inevitable, but I must admit I thought he would be a long-time title holder. He had everything it took to be one. But let's be honest, Lyoto Machida was a destroyer at the time, and it's a shame that his peak occurred during Rashad's, because after losing the belt, he remained as a top light heavyweight for quite a bit, which could have been title defenses had Lyoto not been around. But even without the UFC belt, Rashad was among the MMA elite during his prime. Plus, he won the Ultimate Fighter even though he was one of the smallest guys that season. And while I do come across fighters that fight multiple times in one night, Rashad is the first that I know of to fight the following day after a match, which in my opinion is way more difficult. That's why I would give his MMA career a 9 out of 10. Of course, we can talk about his fall from grace, but like many fighters, he was plagued with injuries and stayed in the game for a little too long. He was technical enough to win a fight by dominating every round, and he had the viciousness to finish it all with one shot. Regardless, Rashad Evans brought the sugar every time. My name is Kiiyon, and this is my take on Sugar Rashad Evans. Do you agree, disagree, or have something else to add? Please put in the comments down below, because I love to read it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. But that's all out for now, so I'll see you on my next one.